do something, get my attention.
All right, I should be all set.
Honestly, the biggest part, Fox, is reading over all the clans and their lore and understanding.
Yeah, I know them
Clans.
mostly, so it's not that. It shouldn't be that big. I'm mainly just seeing what difference is between this edition and last. So.
Not much.
Okay, well that should make things easy. Anyway, I'm gonna hop out and do some reading, so I'll be back in a little bit.
Sounds good.
Bexy, how long is this going?
Probably an hour and a half to 2 hours, depending on how many questions I get.
Fair.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll hopefully be back before then.
Okay,
Later.
sounds good.
That's it.
All right, let's get this party started in here.
Amazon Japan, right there.
I don't see it on his thing yet, but I'm assuming it takes a little second to kick in.
Yep.
So I'll just go over some like an intro while we're waiting for that to kick in. More or less what I am planning on doing, at least this session, is sort of get like a very basic intro into building your own world, homebrew style. The other thing I am going to be talking about are some like resources and some books that I highly recommend for new DMs to pick up and to use to their advantage. So starting off with me, I'm just do a quick intro. I started playing DM or Dungeons and Dragons about 3 years ago. I first started out playing a Pathfinder campaign, and as a new player, that was a bit daunting because Pathfinder is very intricate and very like in-depth sort of deal. So after that, we switched to 5th edition, which was a little easier to pick up. And as a new player, I would have probably preferred starting off with 5th edition over Pathfinder. But it's all based on taste, really.
Did you click live at all?
I did click live, but I don't see...
What's your channel's name?
So my channel name is this. I'll just put it in general chat. I have my channel up, and it's streaming just fine.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know why it's not working on his side, but mine's working just
He
fine.
probably hasn't turned on hosting yet.
Okay, fair enough. Okay. Well, at least I got that link so you guys can now watch what I'm doing. So, more or less what I got set up here. Let's see. I'm going over basically the campaign that I have been running for the last 2 years or so. Just to give you guys a general idea of what I've been working on. So, more or less, what I will start with is at least talking about what kind of books that a DM should have and the reasons why behind it. So, start us off here, we've got the PHB. That should be a no-brainer. As a new DM, you're going to need to know the nuances with the characters that are playing your campaign. I wouldn't say you need to like study it front to back, but at least have a general knowledge on how their abilities work on and off the battlefield. In addition to that, the PHB has all the spells and their abilities and their uses in the back of the book. So if you got a heavy set of spellcasters and they're casting all these spells that you have no clue what they really do, not saying that they would like fudge their abilities or anything, but it's also a good idea to know some of that stuff. So PHB, definitely something you're going to need to have. The next book should be pretty obvious. The Dungeon Master Guide. Very useful to carry with you. Gives you a plethora of world building ideas, working on your campaign, items, magical items you can use, a whole bunch of like downtime things that you can do in between like battles and RPs that they're doing. And it gives you world building ideas based off of the Forgotten Realms area in the world there. So plenty of information to go off of that. And lastly, the Monster Manual. Gives you all the creatures that you can more than willingly adjust the stats on and be able to kind of like throw your players for a loop if they're the type of metagamer that decides to go like, hey, I know what an ogre's AC is and what their health is. All I have to do is hit it 5 more times and it's dead. So more than able to like adjust the stats for all those. Plus, it gives you like a nice collection of like little NPCs that you can throw in there as well, just to kind of like add a bit more flavor and life to your game. Now, I'll go into just a couple of books that I've realized as a DM are very, very useful. One of those is something called the Ultimate Character Backstory Guide. So it looks like this, if anyone's following along here. And basically what it is if there is someone in your group or yourself that really enjoys character building, role-playing, and just building a character from level 1 to 20, this book has almost everything that you could possibly want in building a character's backstory. And it's a thick book. Like, this goes about 260 pages worth of information that you can throw into your character's backstory. Some of the highlights would be, let me just take a look at my notes here real quick. So it covers subjects such as alignment. It has a holiday generator. You can create prophecies, and it covers subjects of rivalries, mentors, and villain creation in this book. So in case you're having like a hard time, it's like, what kind of villain hook do I need to create for this party to actually get them interested in my campaign? This is a good book to use for that. The second, or a couple series of books, is called Table Fables 1 and 2. Looks like this. And basically, it gives you tables. Table generators. Random generators of, like, items. A town, city generator, a kingdom generator, dungeon generator. Like, anything that you would need on the fly that you're just like pulling out of thin air, you can switch to this book real quick after a battle and go like, okay, roll a couple random dice or just pick off the table. This is what you get off of this body. This is what you get off this body, etc., etc. And you don't even have to prep ahead of time. You just like maybe bookmark the page that you want to use in the game at a certain time, and then when you get to that time, then just like throw in the book and you're just like, okay, this is all the stuff that you get from the drop. You don't have to like prep any like extra loot. You don't have to prep any extra magic items. Look through your DM guide and decide, okay, is this item too powerful? Is this item too powerful? Just use the tables in this series of books and you're well on your way to getting that taken care of. So those are the books that I would highly recommend as a new DM or just starting out. Next, I'll talk about how to build your world. Now, I'm going to start off by saying this is like a terminology that I use in particular. It's called the macro versus the micro approach. The macro approach is sort of like a top-down approach where you start building your world right from the beginning. So you've got your continent, then you've got your races, and then you've got the kingdoms in each race, then you've got the placement of where they are on the continent, then you slowly build out, okay, what are the cities? What are the towns? What do the cities and towns have for trade-wise, political-wise? How are the kingdoms run? Are they oligarchy? Are they monarchy? Stuff like that, if you want to go in that great detail. And this is going to be all done prior to when you actually look for players to play in your homebrew. So you're going to be doing a lot of prep for this macro build that you're doing. You're going to want a pantheon eventually, so a set of gods and goddesses that you want to use. My particular style is I just borrow from different pantheons. I've done H.P. Lovecraft. I've thrown that in. I've taken some gods from other campaigns that I have played and thrown them in as well. Stuff like that. I've created my own factions as well. So like in Waterdeep, for example, some of the people here have played that campaign. More or less, it's like, what faction do I want to be a part of? And what kind of perks, pros and cons for each faction are there? And does that outweigh what I'm looking for? So for example, I got a faction that's strictly just sorcerers and warlocks. I got a faction that's strictly wizards. I've got a faction that is basically world police. They're a bunch of retired mercenaries and ex-guardsmen that sort of travel the world and are like the Salvation Army. They help where they can. I've got a faction that is an assassins guild, and they all have different sects and different sort of like, I guess, perks, you could say, to how they kill people. And And I've got like religious cults that I've made up off the top of my head. One's the Order of Lactose. Their thing is like they don't want to eat anything that's like milk-based products. They're just strictly like vegans. And then I've got a polar opposite. There's a cult that worships El Cow, who's a Spanish-talking cow. And they talk about a prophecy or a cataclysmic event they call the Great Milking, where El Cow will come down from the skies and wash away everybody with a torrent of like homogeneous milk. And they're saying everyone should repent prior to this apocalyptic event because it's so horrible it's going to kill everybody. That type of thing. So it's an interesting thing to come up with your own pantheon as well, but I won't get into that too much. So like I said, macro building is more or less prepping way ahead of time and then having a world that your players can hop into right away. And they will have all the stuff that they can pick from. A downside to this is, unfortunately, they can be overwhelmed with the amount of information that you're throwing at them right at the start. And they could find a hard time finding their spot in that world. And it could take a little while for them to sort of build their character into the world that you've made. There are some ways around that. Like you just take your time over session 0 and you help them build their character the way that they'd like to, and kind of explain the factions to them a little bit easier. So those are some pros and cons of macro building. What I did to start is I did a micro approach. Now the micro approach I call this because what I did is I knew this world was in my head. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do a one-shot. I'm going to practice this one-shot with people that have never done this homebrew before, just to get sort of like an idea of what to expect, what I can tweak, what I can change, and then moving forward I can test this one shot with other people and they can give me more feedback. I did this one shot about 6 or 7 times before I was comfortable running it on a Roll20 campaign. And when I ran it on a campaign, I still told them it's going to be a one-shot for now, may grow into like a campaign eventually. I haven't quite decided yet, but depending on how the reaction was, I was going to gauge that and see if I should go forward with it. The characters loved the campaign that I put forth, so they decided that, hey, let's make this into sort of like a campaign. So I was like, okay. So all I had at that time was like a town that they had fought in, and that was it. Like they got out of the town and now they're on their way to a city. And I'm like, okay, I've got about 2 weeks to prep a city. What can I use to get this together? And I scoured the internet for like online resources to determine what kind of things could help me. I found a bunch of maps that I had saved off of Google and off of Pinterest. And I used those maps in my Roll20 campaign. Didn't even have to spend a dime on them. And I sort of tweaked certain areas on them as well. And the end result was something that was actually quite surprisingly easy. Like the players that I had, I'll just see if I can pull up the map here that I used. Let's do, yeah. So I had 2 maps. I had sort of like a world map, or like a zoomed in version of it. So the bottom map is Wintervale and the surrounding areas, as well as points of interest that I had put on the map here. So 1, the Dread Swamps over here, Wintervale, the main areas in the center, and 3rd is the dock area attached to the river. And then at the top, there is a more zoomed in approach where they can go to a Fighters Guild, a Mage Guild, and a fort in Wintervale. And then I had a separate map that just showed the fort and sort of like little areas that they could visit in that fort. So that was like, it took me maybe about 30 minutes online, and I found those 2 maps and I tweaked them, and I was already had like a place where they could go and like chill and just kind of explore. I gave them 3 little mini hooks, or sort of like mini quests that they could go onto and choose whatever they wanted. If they chose one quest, then the other quest obviously would not be available anymore. There is a chance that I can always use those quests later because I still have the notes for them. So it's not something that you have to worry about, like, oh, they didn't go on this quest, so now I can't ever use this again. No, just put it in a different place, and then you can still use that quest, so the notes aren't like a complete waste of time. So that's sort of like a quick thing about micro builds. Now, the pros of a micro build is the players can go into this campaign and you have as little prep as you really want, or as much prep as you want. But more or less, all you really need is a town, some little quests that they can go on and do something, and if they start going off the rails a bit, improvise, more or less. Like Thomas was talking about in his channel, he says, like, you can always move those quests into different areas of the map. So if the players were just like, oh, well, I don't want to do the dock quest, that sounds boring, I want to go all the way over here in the middle of the farm area and see what the farmers are up to. And then you're like, okay, sure, go ahead and do that. And then you just kind of like find a hook for the dock quest and like use it in the farmland. So for example, maybe the dock quest was like, there's some people who were smuggling goods. And then they go to the farmland and they see like this mysterious looking character talking to one of the farmers very loudly saying, give me all your food or else we're going to send so-and-so after you to show you up, to give you a punch in the face, to teach you a lesson. And then the person leaves. And then the PCs approach the farmer and they go like, hey, like, who was that guy? It was like, oh, that's so-and-so from the docks. Like, him and this gang are like trying to like muscle their way into the farmland territory and make us like pay protection and stuff like that. Like, they're such jerks. I wish someone would deal with them, right? So there's another hook. You're just like, oh, okay. So that kind of entices players to think about, hey, maybe we could actually help this guy out. Maybe there's something worth our while in this area. And then they go and do it. So that's kind of like a way of improvising outside of that. So that's some pros of a micro build. Cons of a micro build: you're not going to have probably nearly as much for the characters to look at right away if you're just doing a micro build, because more or less you're just going to have like a town and a city and maybe a couple NPCs that they can interact with, and that's pretty much it. Anything outside of that is going to be just kind of like pulling it out of thin air, essentially. But this is something that you can always talk about with your players in session 0. You just say, look, I'm just starting this one shot. I don't have a lot of this world built yet, but I'm planning on building it outward as we go. Is that okay with you guys, or would you prefer a world that's a little more fleshed out, a little more like lore and history behind it? And if they say, yeah, we'd prefer something that we can actually sink our teeth into a bit more, you go like, okay, just give me maybe a week or so to prepare some like extra stuff that you guys can look into. And then after that, I can come back to you with some of the information that I've put together, and we can go from there. So you just like communicate with your PCs as best you can, and just like get a feel for what is the type of thing that they would prefer. So that's sort of like a micro build in a nutshell. Now, I'll go to some like questions if you guys have any. If not, I can move on to some online resources that I would recommend you looking into. I know I've probably been talking a lot. Okay, well, if there are no questions here, I'll just go ahead and talk about some information in regards to what sort of resources are available to new DMs here. So some online resources that I have found have been very useful in growing a homebrew campaign, because they offer a lot of just like world building generators, town generators, city generators, including maps as well, and kingdoms. One particular one that I have used has been rollfantasy.com. Now on this webpage here is a various amount of tools and sort of like generators that you can use. For example, you can come up with currencies, you can create dungeons, emblems, create encounters, even a family tree and flags of PCs if they want to go that in depth. You can also create monster and spell cards, so you can print those off prior to the session for monsters that you're expecting them to encounter. And you can go ahead and just throw that in there. They also have, again, like random loot generators, random shop inventory. If you're not entirely sure what an apothecary has, use this. They can give you RPG villain generators, scrolls, so like magic scrolls, generate random properties of those. Just a whole lot of like tools and guides that you can go through. Even has like guides, becoming a better GM, how to avoid character deaths if that's something you want to look into, building and character creation, city and clothing creation. A couple other particular items of note that I've realized were actually really handy are puzzles. So dungeon crawling can get a little sloggy sometimes. So what I throw in sometimes is like maybe like a little dungeon puzzle, like a door is locked by this like magical arcane puzzle that the characters have to figure out the combination for. Or even like maybe even a room puzzle, like they go into a room, the door locks behind them, and the other door in the very end locks as well, and the lights go out, and now they're stuck in a dark room with both the doors closed and no way out. But then something glows on the bottom of the floor. A couple runes start showing up, runes that they've never seen before, don't know like the meaning behind. And they have to figure out, okay, what does this mean? And how do we get out of this room? Something to do with these runes. And then if they still are struggling, you can throw them like little hints every now and then. Like, oh, you notice that on the side of the wall, there's a similar rune that shows up. And then next to that rune, it has a number. And each rune has a number on it. And this wall just glows with like all these numbers attached to these runes. And they're like, okay, it's a number system. Maybe there's a certain sequence we have to step in this room to unlock the door. That sort of thing. So lastly for this website, there is songs. And you might be thinking, like, why do I need music? Why don't I just like stream it from YouTube? Well, I've done this. I've done streams from YouTube, and I've run into a couple problems. One big one is copyright. You can get your video flagged very quickly for copyright infringement if you're playing a very popular song. You can also get your video taken down by particular individuals that really don't approve of their songs being used in any form whatsoever in the media. So I've had that happen to me one time where I've had to mute almost about 2.5 minutes of my entire stream because I uploaded it to YouTube and it was copyright stricken, and they took down my video and I had to like mute the whole thing. So that was unfortunate, but I learned my lesson, maybe to use royalty-free music. And that's where this comes in. So this website has royalty-free music that you don't have to worry about getting copyright stricken on. Easily streamed on Twitch, and it comes with a variety of songs with different themes and such on it here, and it's really easy to use. Like there's 153 songs altogether, so odds are you're going to find something that's going to fit the mood that your players are in, whether it's a dungeon or outside in a forest, that sort of thing. So that's more or less Roll for Fantasy. The next website I like to use is worldanvil.com. And I have that up here. I've begun sort of porting my game over here a little bit. But more or less the way World Anvil works is you can create an entire world down to the flora and fauna in the world itself. And it goes really in depth. Like, I have looked through this and there's not enough like information that I've come up with myself to fill what they are asking for, just in like gods and the pantheons and stuff like that. So for example, I'll log into mine here, And I'll just kind of give you like a general idea of what it looks like. So off to the side here is where I have my world. So if you're a person and you're looking at my page, this is what you're going to see. So you're going to see the main title page here. And you're going to see the name of the world created by me. And you're going to see a map off to the side and sort of like a folder series of what I've done thus far in this. So just to expand all these here. So far, I've gotten my deities and religions in. I've gotten my main races. I've gotten the realms that I use in my world. And I've got a list of kingdoms in Adnal thus far. This isn't all of them, but it's the main ones. So if anyone's going through this, they could say, hey, I'm interested in learning about what the elves are like in this guy's world. And click on this. This basically gives you a breakdown of like, okay, the kingdoms of elves are these two. It talks about traditions, talks about religious holidays, talks about the military, and talks about foreign relations with other factions or other races. And it talks about what type of political, what type of group this is, or what type of organization. So it's a geopolitical country, and the government system is an oligarchy. So you're like, okay, that's cool. Let's take a look at, I don't know, religion. What kind of gods does this guy have put together? Let's click on this one, Chronox. Who is Chronox? Chronox, god of time and space, aka also known as the Eternal One. Gives a short blurb on what he is. Gives you information on what his domains are that he's in charge of. And off to the side, quick summary of what he is. So, divine classification, he's a god, that's chaotic good. He resides in the astral realm. He is a part of the Cult of Masquerade, which I'm going to have to retcon. I'll take that out. He is a male. And sort of like a breakdown of like his size, what he looks like, appearance-wise, etc. And you're like, oh, cool. That's interesting. He resides in the astral realm. Okay, what's the astral realm? So you click on this link, takes you right to the astral realm and its description. And you just read up on that. So it didn't take too long for me to kind of like get the idea of how World Anvil works. I'm not going to go into great detail as to what you can do on it, but that might be something I could say for another session. If people are interested in learning more about how to use this website to do some world building, I can show them some basics on that. But yeah, so that is basically World Anvil. Another website that is very popular is something that I've actually used, and it's called Dawn One. I'll just copy the link here and give you like a quick show of what that is. So Dawn One is also kind of like Roll for Fantasy. It doesn't have as much stuff in it, but it's basically got the same general idea. So you got generators from like name generators to random adventure generators. This thing I think is really cool. So in the random adventure generator, you can't think of something off the top of your head. You want just like a quick adventure that these guys can get into, and this could span your entire campaign because it is huge. You can have a specific theme. This is all randomized, by the way. If you don't like this, you can just like click it again and you go like, okay, forget that, I want another one. So you go random generator, let's go another adventure one. Okay, so comes up with a theme, comes up with the goal for your PCs to work on. It gives you a story hook, so some NPC mystery woman shows up. Gives you a plot, sort of like ABC quest, a climax, where it's going to reach. Gives you even like the general setting of where it's going to take place, and then gives you specific settings and that you can use in that area. Provides you a master villain, and provides you some of his like minions, I guess, his like generals, minor villains, and then gives you like an ally you can use, gives you a monster encounter that you could use, character encounters, death traps, chases. There could be an omen or a prophecy attached to this particular campaign. Secret weakness, special condition, moral quandary. Red herrings are always fun to use, just to kind of like throw the players off a little bit. And cruel tricks. So this mission is a ruse. The course of your adventuring, you discover they have been tricked into performing a mission which actually helps the master villain. So the person who put them on this quest is actually the bad guy. That's a pretty popular thing to do to players. Is they gather all the mulligan or all the little items that the master villain needs, and they're like, here you go, this will prevent the evil guy from doing the bad thing. And the person goes like, yeah, sure it will, and he just uses it to do that bad thing. And now the players have to deal with a supercharged villain that completed their goal thanks to their help, which is a pretty interesting sort of hook that you can do. So that's another thing. Now I'm going to talk about some sort of like RPG books and modules where you can go to find some things to use in your campaign if you're finding it's a little difficult. Drive Through RPG. Cannot stress this enough. One of the largest and best resources that you can find as a DM, whether you got money or not. Because there are plenty of people that come up with random one-shot adventures and just like random tables that you can use, and even like paper minis if you can't afford like the really like actual plastic minis. You can actually print off paper minis and paper buildings, put them together yourself with a little glue and tape, and use that as your background setting if you're doing D&D in person, which is super helpful. I started doing that when I first started DMing in person because I didn't have any minis whatsoever. So I just put together a bunch of paper minis, put them down. They're flimsy, but hey, they work for what you need them for. So yeah, whole bunch of resources in here in addition to other RPG books that you can get. Again, won't get into that because that's segueing off a little too further, but if you're ever interested in looking into different types of RPGs, this is a good place to go to and check out as well. Another awesome resource is dmsguild.com. DM's Guild is majority D&D based and adventures based on D&D, and it comes with some nice bundles that you can purchase, expanding the monster manual. So if you want any extra monsters, you can pay for a PDF of that. A lot of like pay what you want, or even like zero cost builds that you can have, or adventures that you can purchase. Comes up with a lot of like, again, like generators that you can use, whole bunch of adventures, and even maps. Lots of maps that you can use as well in any campaign that you decide to get into. So there's that one. And the last one I have on my list here is something probably not too obvious to a lot of people, but if you're looking for maps, or particularly like some unique creatures that you can throw into your homebrew campaign, even ones that I find that could be used as livestock, or even just like flora and fauna of the world that you want to build, Pinterest, DeviantArt, and just Google will help you find the things that you are looking for. One artist in particular on DeviantArt, his name is Mad Cow Chef. He provides free map tiles that go together. They're like 10 by 10 map tiles, and they go together with pretty much other tiles of its set in any direction. So you can move it around any which way you want, and it's really, really cool to be able to just make your own map. I'll show you an example of that, what I did in my campaign. I used his map tiles to make a giant castle siege at the end of my first campaign. I think this is it. No, that's not it. Exterior. No. Forest map? Actually, let's see, where is it? This is what I was looking for. Ha! Okay, Castle Siege. So this was the final battle of my first campaign. I built this basically from scratch, and you can kind of make out like all the tiles that I ended up using for this. But more or less, like this is all Mad Cow Chef's tile system, and I just positioned them in a specific way to make like a big castle, essentially a big fort. And the players spent a session and a half, so like about 5.5 hours, doing this big siege battle. And there were orcs and there were catapults, and the big baddie was riding a undead young black dragon. It was like epic stuff. So this is something that I was able to come together. This is one of my most proudest moments because it took me a while to figure out how the heck I'm going to run a massive army battle, and I just came up with like this basic thing. So I gave everyone different turn orders. I boiled down enemy and ally rolls to what they could get to. So for example, an enemy roll, if an enemy on their turn rolled a 17 to 20, it would destroy one of the ally squads or destroy a siege weapon. Ally rolls, if you rolled a crit, you would lose men in a squad. Or if they rolled a 17 to a 20, a ballista, one of these things, would hit the dragon that was flying around. And I gave them 5 objectives that they needed to accomplish in order to beat the entire mission and complete the campaign. So that was a really fun thing to do. So yeah, Mad Cow Chef, one of the good resources that you can find. And like I said before, Pinterest, also a good resource for just finding. I don't know if Pinterest will. I'm kind of new to this. Is like, does it only work on phone? No. Okay. So Pinterest, again, also a very good resource to be using. Let's see if I can get my login here. There we go. So I have some saved things. So okay. So I found this stuff on Pinterest. I changed it to D&D monsters and D&D maps. So I'll click on the maps here for a sec here. Okay, so these are just some of the maps that I ended up finding. I found a tower that has 3 tiers. I found a village that has an underground cellar system. I found a fort on top of a snowy mountain. I found this, which I really liked. I actually used in my campaign. Is like a 4-tier sort of like ship that people were sailing on. And you can find like all different sizes. Like this one's huge. So these types of maps I used in my campaign for ship battles and stuff like that. What else do we have here? Let's go to the creatures. So some of the D&D monsters that I saved. There are actually like free PDF books, like entire books that you can find. But on top of that, you can look for character concept art. You can look for unique monsters. Let's see if I can find one that I actually ended up using. Oh, yeah. So this is a War Titan. So I use this in my campaign. Completely unique monster. The nice thing about using unique monsters is people can't metagame, because they have no idea how big it is, or what its AC is, or what it can actually do. So that's always nice to throw into people's faces. If you're feeling a bit cheeky, you can choose one of these. A ginormous squirrel. Someone custom made or homebrewed a giant squirrel to use in somebody's campaign. So you can do that. Oh my god. Or if you want to be real cheesy, cheese elemental. Someone literally made a cheese elemental. You could use that in your campaign. Oh, this is cute. A cinnamon squirrel. Aw. Chocolate bunny. Gummy creature. Like, so many random weird ass things. Like, the amount of things that you could just throw your players for a loop with is ridiculous. Like coffee dragon. That's pretty funny. Avocado. It's just ridiculous things that you could do. So yeah, that's just like a tip of the iceberg of what you can do in your campaign. Just going on Pinterest and typing in D&D monsters, you'll find just like the most random, ridiculous things. So there was that. I think that's more or less all that I was going to be talking about today. Let's see. Oh yeah, that was about it. So if you guys have any questions or want to see the recording of this later for reference, I'm going to have it on my Twitch channel, Smexy_pants86. If you guys have any questions now, would be a good time to ask them. Otherwise, I'll just bid you guys adieu, and thanks for joining. Yeah, no problem. So Living Primal, did you get the name of the site? I'm sorry, I missed your comment there. Okay, awesome. That's good. Yeah. So I'm glad you guys found that informative, and hopefully you'll get some cool ideas once you guys start some of your own campaigns.
Will you be posting these links anywhere?
Oh, for sure. Like, I can post all these links in the general chat for everyone to reference if they wish.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Any other questions, or are we good?
I think I'm good.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks for joining me, guys. And if you found this informative, let me know. I might run this a little bit more in depth. I'm thinking either you're talking about like more about World Anvil, or even going over how to run a campaign in Roll20. I will show you one thing before we go today. So off to the side, on the right hand side, I have like all my sort of like tabs set up for using in my campaign. So at the top I've got add null, which are the locations that the players have visited and any notes that I decided to add to it. Haven't done that quite yet, but that's something I'm going to work towards. On the world map, I'll just zoom in here. So at the moment I created sort of like little kingdoms. This is the kingdom of the humans, which has 4 separate kingdoms run by a central one. And then we got the dwarves down here and the elves over here with a sort of like, I guess you could say, rebel faction slash kingdom over here. I also have, again, like the realms that I've created, short blurbs about those, how they work. I've got the races with general info, clans of the dwarves. Under elves, I've got the caste system for them, and the human kingdom, I've got all the separate kingdoms and what they're kind of like. For factions, I've got it designated as good, bad, and religious. So for example, Order of the Phoenix is like an order of paladins used by the Veldorian kingdom. The Sisquelian Conglomerate is the wizard group. The Tempests are the sorcerers and the warlocks. The Valorian Guardsmen are basically the world police, or the Salvation Army of the world. And the International Arcane Union are essentially sort of like a spy agency for the humans that deal with like forbidden magics and keeping those out of reach of any people that would use them for evil. The bad groups would be the Green Scourge or the Orcs. The Mismic Order is a sect of assassins. Shadow Stalkers are basically the underground sort of like rogues and thieves and like criminal underground of the world. And the Blighted are an religious cult offshoot of the Geth. And Geth is my undead god, or the god of the undead. And then I got my religious ones, the Order Lactose, Charlatology, the Bakrug cult, who worship Bakrug, which is a H.P. Lovecraft god of nightmares. And of course you gotta have Hastur, because why not? If I'm gonna go H.P. Lovecraft, gotta have the King in Yellow. And then I go into greater detail, major gods that I have, and Pantheon minor gods, my characters that are in the campaign, and the NPCs that they have been in contact with. So lots of detail that I've grown over a series of like 2 to 3 years. One thing that you might find useful is this, the monster manual that I created. I watched a video on YouTube, and this guy in a 2-part series put together a template that you can use to basically create monsters out of tokens. And the way that works is, if you're tired of referencing and going back to your, say, your monster manual book and flipping in between 2 monsters that they're currently fighting to see what you're going to use next against them, you could just go like, okay, I'm going to use this template, and I'm going to create a monster, and I'm going to add all its stats and all its abilities, and it's just going to work by itself. So I have this, for example, I've already put in its AC under the red. I've put in its full health, which is 30 HP. And up at the top here are all its actions and all its abilities. So in the chat, in Discord, you click an action. It's like, okay, I want to construct. You click construct. It automatically rolls the dice for you to see if it constructs the player. 6 misses. Okay, let's do a life drain. Let's say it did a life drain of 13 and it hit the player because their AC is 10. Okay, what's the damage? Click on life drain. 7 necrotic damage to your player. Okay, does this thing have any immunities, they would ask. Okay, what are its immunities? This is vulnerable to fire and immune to being blinded and deafened. Yes, I created a macro bar for the token. That's how it worked.
I would definitely love to learn how to do that then on one of your next sessions.
Oh, for sure. I can definitely teach you guys how to do that. So I could actually go into a little detail of how it's put together right now, if that's okay with you guys.
I've got a game starting in about 15 minutes.
Okay, fair enough. I'll just like touch on it then in that case. So I'll go back to here. This is the template I use. So we're not going to make a creature yet, but next time I host, I can definitely put you through that. So I already got this template made, and I go to the character sheet, and it's an NPC. You type in the NPC name, say Goblin. NPC type is like a small fiend. Its armor class, type of armor, hit points, etc., etc. Like all the basic stats you would have in the monster manual, you would take that information and put it in this screen here. Once you've done that, this is where it gets a little complicated. You have all these little actions here that you can change. So for example, I'll just pop one of these guys open. Let's do my homebrew fungal zombie here. So if I want to edit you, come here. Actually, I think I have to do it through this. Yes, okay. So I have all his stats already put in here, and I've got his attributes. So what I did is like under his character sheet here, this is what it would look like after you've put in like all the information here. It auto-populates to this screen here. So it's got its traits and its actions. Its traits go under the traits section of the macro. So if you go over to here, trait, spore cloud, undead fortitude, and it goes in order. So it's like a 1, 2, 3 sort of system. And the macro will tell the computer which trait it is based off of where it's placed on the character sheet that you just made. So after you've put in all of this information, you got your actions, your traits, and everything, it will come up with this long little menu up here that will show you its abilities and its initiative. Like even does initiative too, which is I think really cool. So you click on this little clock here, and you go like, okay, roll for initiative on this unit. And not only will it roll the initiative, but it will automatically place that in the turn order here. Unfortunately, and this is a bug that I have found, it does not place it in the proper order for me. So I kind of have to move it around a little. It's a little annoying, something I gotta work on fixing, but outside of that, it's still pretty useful.
You have found that you can go in there and you can sort them with the turn order box underneath the set.
descending.
Oh, like this little cog here. Numerically ascending. Ah, see, now you're teaching me something.
but decent.
Beauty. That works. That works just fine.
Does that work with existing creatures that are already in there, or do you have to start from an NPC template?
So it doesn't work with creatures already in the game. And what I mean by that is like you would have to make this monster manual from scratch. But what I've been doing is like for if I'm ever having like an encounter, I only make the creatures that I am using and I go from there. I have not filled every single thing out because if I did that, that would be, in my opinion, a complete waste of time. I only use creatures that I'm going to be using in combats for that next session. Outside of that, I have not put in the entire monster manual by hand because it's just way too much work. So if you're looking through like this area here, right, the information section, and you got your monster manual that you're looking through for monsters, it will give you the stats, no problem. Like an adult copper dragon, give you all the stuff that you need to know for these people to fight. But the downside is it has no macros built in. But the nice thing is you can copy and paste this information if you don't have a physical copy of the monster manual. You take this information that's already in here, you pop this window out, and then you go back, and then you pick up your monster manual template. And from there, you just switch in between windows. And you're like, okay, cool. So I'm going to do an adult copper dragon. Go to character sheet.
Is
And
there
then-
a default NPC template, or are you just doing an add, creating new type of thing?
It is kind of like a full NPC template, yes. This is a custom sort of token that you would need to make by hand, but once it's made, you don't have to worry about it ever again. So if you got goblins and you had them fight goblins in one campaign and you want them to fight them again, you can just drag and drop a bunch of goblin tokens. You're like, okay, they're already made and good to go. It's a really helpful system that I learned to use. So yeah, I will conclude it there, but I think next time what we can do is we can go into a little more in-depth as to how to set up the monster manual template. That can be one of the items we talk about the next time I do this. And yeah, so thanks again for joining, guys.
Great. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, thanks for hosting.
Yeah, no problem. Have a good day.